All right, we're back. We are COMP397. That's Web Game Programming at Centennial in the winter 2018 semester, one day before our daylight saving times changes. Remember tonight, clocks are moving forward 1 hour. Spring forward, right? Which means you're going to lose 1 hour of sleep tomorrow, right? And that means that when it's I think it's 2 o'clock tonight, if I'm not wrong. It's going to go to 3 o'clock, so it's going to be later, right? So they're doing that at 2 because they don't want people to stop going to bars, right? I think that's what it's not going to affect so many businesses. Anyways, but I'm saying that as an aside, but today what we're going to be talking about is game optimization. Just some administration before we get started. Just remember that next week, the original plan was that week 7, that was this week, next week is supposed to be your alpha release. That's still on track. And that's worth 15% of your final grade next week, right? For your alpha release, remember that you're going to have 2 levels working, level 1 and level 2, right? With this, it's okay to have some, placeholder assets. You don't have to have, crazy assets for alpha. I mean, as long as you have some placeholder assets, it's okay. Then the week after, that's March 24th, you're going to have your midterm test, which is also worth 15% of your final grade, which is going to be all on Create.js and TypeScript, the stuff we've talked about before. You'll need to know about GitHub, how to put things up on GitHub. And I'll be giving you a project that's in class. You have full open internet and open book. So you can bring materials, you can look at the web. The only thing you can't do is talk to each other on the test. So everything else goes. You can't communicate with each other. You can't send messages. So cell phones, you have to, kind of not have cell phones. And as well as any messaging apps will have to be closed. I may have an invigilator that comes around to check you while I check you, so to make sure that no one's cheating. But at the end of the day, my expectation is that you know how to program in Create.js with Create.js and TypeScript, and to create a small game based on a template that I give you, right? So I'm going to give you something that's working, and there might be several tasks, task 1, 2, 3, 4, or something, and you have to do those tasks in class. You'll have the full 3 hours to do that. Okay, so you have 3 hours to do something to make it work. So questions around that. So next week alpha, week after is the exam. Okay, that's 2 things. The third thing is that you've been working on your alpha release as an example, and your first playable you did the week before we left for mid-semester break. And I got you to do a kind of a feedback or peer review. I'm going to get you to do another one now. So it's been another, a couple weeks since we've seen each other. You've been working. You should have been working on your alpha release. So there's going to be, if you look up on eCentennial, there is a lab 2, which is a peer review 2, which is due tonight at midnight. So please get that done. It's due tonight. All it means is you're going to rank your team and yourself and see if you're productive or not and how things are going. Okay, so that's due tonight at midnight. Okay, so that's it for the administration piece. Let's talk about what we're going to be doing today. And I'll turn all this off so you don't see it. So today we're going to do some optimization. We're going to start off with optimization because there's been some stuff we did recently. Our code base from last week, or the week we left before we went on break, wasn't optimized. There's some stuff we have to move around to make it better. So I'm going to make a new project based on your project, MailPilot Demo B. I made C for the team before you guys, and I put it up on GitHub. And now I'm going to make D. And the reason why I'm making D is because you have A and B are like a previous version. I could have also done another branch, but we haven't really talked about GitHub branching yet, and I'm going to probably leave that for another day. So let's talk about another version. So I'm going to take MailPilot B. So let's take a look at MailPilot B online. So I'm just going to go and take a look at that. So if you look at Centennial College on GitHub, you see that there is MailPilot B, this one. I'm going to start with that one. That was 14 days ago. And I'm going to work towards something like what I did about an hour ago. Okay? MailPilot B. So I've already downloaded this one, of course. I've been working with it. I'm just going to duplicate it here on my desktop. So I'm going to duplicate it. And I'm going to change the name to MailPilot D. because this is the one that I want to work on with you guys. You're the B team, but we're going to do the D project. The MailPilot D is just another version of the same thing we've been doing so far, right? But I'm going to optimize. I've been talking about not optimizing. I keep talking about, hey, we iterate. We try not to optimize until we need to. At this point, we need to, right? Because we've been doing some stuff that's okay, but there's some things that are not so good. So we have to optimize. So I'm going to grab MailPilot D and pull it in. And again, I'm using Visual Studio Code here. I'm going to pull up the window. So I'm going to go to into the folder, so desktop. And in my desktop, I have COMP397. And in there, I have COMP397-W2018- MailPilot-D. And I'm going to get rid of my GitHub in there because it already has the GitHub repo from MailPilot B. I'm going to say rm-rf, be careful with this command, .git, which removes the Git folder. And I'll do a git init, a git add dot, a git commit -m, initial commit. And then what I want to do is up online on GitHub here, I want to create another repo for you guys. So this will be a separate repo just for this recording. So COMP397-W2018- MailPilot demo B. And like we've done before, I'm just going to grab the last two lines of this on here, copy it, go back to the terminal and paste it. If you're a PC person, just right click and it'll paste it in. And then press enter. And then what this will do is it'll put up the new version of my code up on GitHub, so you have another copy of it. It's just called MailPilot D. All right, so where last we left off, I had this running on my website, Zeopolis.com, right? And we had a problem. One of the things we talked about is there are two different, I'm going to just take these away for now. There are two different things we're doing here. One is we've got this MailPilot D, but I also have in my own website, if I go to run this thing, so if I go to my profile, if I go to my repositories, I have this one. I have my name of my repository.github.io. And this is where I put MailPilot to run. Notice I have this Node Jekyll file up on GitHub. This will enable me to use GitHub pages and see my Node modules. Otherwise, my Node modules will be invisible to my code, and I can't use anything that's inside of it, which caused me to have problems last week. So you must have a .node Jekyll file that's empty. It's completely empty. That sits inside the root of your folder if you're going to use GitHub pages and Node modules. If you don't care about that, it's not important to use Node modules. If you're doing it some other way, like the old way we used Bower, we didn't need to have the Node Jekyll file. The CNAME file, like I pointed out before, points to my website. So my personal website is called mylastname.com, so www.zeopolis.com, and the CNAME file just points to that. And so then when I go to my website, it shows my this little game we made, right? So again, we had this going on, right, where I had basic collisions, movements, and I also used keyboard controls instead of mouse controls. Very, very simple, and some basic collisions. And then I died, right? When I die, it takes me to the game over screen. That's what we had last week. This week, what I want to do is I want to optimize my code. I want to do some animation this week. So talk about animations and what they are and how to do them. And then also get rid of this font, which is pretty ugly, right? And change it to something more exciting. So my font is an old Consolas font. Maybe it doesn't match with my game too much. I want to make it nice, and I want to talk about how to do web fonts properly, right, with Create.js. So all those things, if I can get to it, I'll also update my website, so it'll have the new stuff, and I'll show you how that's done, right, as well. But that's really it in a nutshell this week. So I'm just updating this, changing my font, and adding animations, right? And changing my preloader and all that stuff. So a few optimizations, which are really key for your game, okay? All right, so let's go back to my Visual Studio Code. So I got my VS Code. I'm loading D. The first thing I want to do whenever we load VS Code is I want to run my Transpiler, so Command-Shift B or Control-Shift-B on a PC, which brings up this. It gives me my watch task. By the way, guys, you need to know how to do this for your test, right? Because if you don't know how to launch your watch task, then it'll never transpile. And if it doesn't transpile, you're going to say, I don't know why, I keep making changes, nothing's working. It's not working because you never transpiled. So you must have this working on your test, which I recommend you follow along with me and practice today, so that way 2 weeks from now, you're going to be a little bit better off. Okay, so that's the first part. The second part is, like we normally do, I'm going to go into my terminal where I have access to my files, and I'm going to run light-server, which is basically synchronizes my local development view, right? This is my development release, and this is my deployment release online. My online release and my local release are different, okay? Or they will be, right? My local release, my local development version, which is on localhost 3000, is going to be ahead of my deployment release after today, until I push it. Okay, so that's the way it works. So now that I can test, I have that thing going, I want to look at places where I can optimize. And I know immediately what I want to do. In my scripts folder, I have in my objects folder this game.ts, which looks like this. And this, even though it's an object, shouldn't be an object. It should be a manager. I should be able to do a game manager, because all the files that are inside this, all the static variables that I have inside my game class, right, are really just global variables that I'm using, and I'm encapsulating it with this game object. That's what I'm doing, okay? So it shouldn't be an object game, it should be a managers, right? Which means I want to go into manage, I want to move it. I want to move that object into managers. That's going to require some changes. Let's do the first thing. I'm going to go new file, and I'm going to call this game.ts. And I'm just for now, I'm going to go into my objects and game.ts and copy everything in here and put it inside my game.ts over here. But it's not going to be an object. Notice it turns red because there's duplication, right? It's not going to be in objects. It's going to be in managers. Okay? So now my game has managers, right? Managers, a game manager as opposed to a game object. Doesn't make sense, right? So that's the first change. It's been bugging me for a while, which means I can get rid of this one. I don't need this one anymore, so I can get rid of it. I can delete it. And I can also get rid of my JS file inside my objects. I'm just going to do some cleanup. And I'm also going to get rid of my game .map in my, make sure you get rid of the right thing, guys, or else you'll delete stuff that you don't want to. All right, so there, I've deleted everything that I wanted to, but now I have to realign everything and change some stuff, some references. So in my index.html, obviously there is no more objects.game, right? This one here. It stays here, but now it's going to be managers. And it's going to stay up here because, you know what, I'm going to use it other places. Okay, so that's where it's going to be. That's the first change. I also want to change my references. So in my core, in my references.ts, I want to change this one so it says managers. Notice it gives me an error because it didn't exist before. And just by the way, if you want to see this, how it works, I have my managers down here. This is my reference file, right? I know there was a note that said something like on Slack that says you don't need your references file, right? And that's not true. You need your references file, right? And although you think you can do it inside of your tsconfig.json, it doesn't work like that. So just make sure that it all works. I'm getting a weird error, just a position error. Don't worry about this right now. In your game.ts, in your game.ts, there's also a problem in here now, right? Because, and you can see that there's several problems. All the red marks on the right-hand side tell you where all the errors are. So if I scroll down, I can see that there's errors here. Why? Because there's no objects.game.stage. It's managers.game.stage. Right, so I got to change that everywhere. I might as well copy paste. You can also find replace. I find it a little better to do it this way. That way you have control. Sometimes copy paste does other weird. Sorry, switch replace does other weird things that you don't want. Okay, so those things are changed. I know also that I refer to my game in different places, right? So for example, in my scene file, as well as other places. Let's just make sure that I save this thing. I'm not sure why it's giving me this error right now. And we'll talk about this because there might be another problem somewhere else, but I don't know why I'm getting that error. I didn't get it earlier. In my objects, I also have to see where it is, and so far also in my scenes, right? So as an example, maybe there won't be a problem inside of my button because there's no problem. See, there's no problems here, but I'm going to search for all of them. So button is okay, right? Did I get rid of my cloud by accident? Yes, this is what happens when you delete like I did. I got rid of the wrong thing. Look, here's my cloud.js.map. See that? And I got rid of my cloud, but I left my game.js.map in there. See? Sometimes that's what I'm telling you. You know, it makes sense to be careful how you do things. I can always get it back, but this is what happens sometimes. That's why this is complaining, because there is no cloud.ts anymore. I deleted it. Luckily, we have trash, right? And I can put it back. So let's just, before we go there, I'm just realigning things. I'm going to go into mailpilot.d. Oops, mailpilot.d. And inside my scripts objects, right? I have my cloud.js and my cloud map. I don't have my cloud.ts, so hopefully I have it in here. Here it is. Luckily, I have it in here. Otherwise, I would have a problem. So I actually covered it from crash. Right? I deleted it by accident. And that should clean up my problem. But you can see now that plain.ts is a problem because there's two errors. Because now you can see that I have objects.game, which is managers.game. My scenes have a problem because instead of objects.game, it should be managers.game. Same thing with my play scene. Again, this is part of me moving things around because I don't agree that there should be where it should be. It's just like I call this optimization, but it's really, you know, makes more sense this way, especially when you read it or you pass this information to somebody else. They understand what a game object is, a game manager is, as opposed to the other stuff. Now I got all these changes. I'm going to save all. All right, so these are all the changes that I saved. And there's still a problem with my collision manager. You can see that I have several errors in here. By the way, see how they turn red? The red tells me that there's a problem in the file. So again, I'm just going to go in here and just change all this stuff. Yes. Not everywhere. It'll do it within file. And like I said, I could find replace if I want to, the symbol. But my problem with it is sometimes it does weird things, and I don't want that to happen. I'm just doing it by hand. So it'll take 1 second more. We don't have a lot of references. Sorry? What makes the, I can't hear you. WebStorm, yeah. I don't use WebStorm, but yeah, WebStorm is pretty cool. It allows you to go through the entire project and rename. WebStorm is a great tool, but I prefer Visual Studio Code. All right, so if you look at, so I've done this, and I'm just going to close all these off. And just to test it, I'm going to go back to my page here, and this should be running now, right? And if it's not, if there's some problem, I'll see it because, you know, I've realigned my stuff, right? And let's just die. Good. So that's good, right? So now I've done some optimization. So there's more to be done, by the way. There's more to be done. I'm not finished yet. So that's one part of my optimization. But the other part is the problem that I have in my core. So what I'm always doing is I'm passing along this. I have my assets manager, and I keep on passing it around. But inside my managers folder, so inside my managers under my game manager, I have asset manager as a global too, right? And I want to use my asset manager, my global, because I don't want to pass my asset manager everywhere. I want to just point to it with a pointer, right? So in order for me to do that, in here in my game.ts, after I have my asset manager created, which is a load queue, down inside of my start method, somewhere down here, underneath where I do my keyboard manager, and before my main, I'm going to call my asset manager. I'm going to say something like this. I'm going to say managers.game.asset manager is equal to asset manager. And that's going to get a reference to my asset manager. Now what that's going to do is enable me to take away references to asset manager down here. I don't have to pass it anymore to my scene because it's in global space now. So I can do this, which is going to cause me some errors. And I know that my play scene and my over scene, all that stuff requires it right now because my object scene, so if you look at my scene class, here's my scene class needs it, right? And you know what? I don't want my scene class to need it anymore. So I'm going to get rid of it from my constructor, which is going to cause a problem because there is no asset manager coming in. But what I could do is do the global. So I could say managers.game.asset manager, which will solve that for all of my scenes. So I'll have access to my asset manager, right? And also, you know what? My scene, which is a class, shouldn't be a class. It should be an abstract class. So I can do that. That's a new thing for TypeScript for you guys. It's an abstract class. So I should never be able to create a concrete object from my abstract class scene, right? I'm not going to directly inherit. I'm going to make another thing from it. I'm going to extend it, right? Because it makes more sense to do so. Okay, so this is what I've done here. I've changed this. And these things need to be changed still. It's in my scenes. The actual scenes themselves also have to be changed now. Because I've made that change, you can see that in my start scene, and my play scene, and my over scene, I'm going to have a problem. So my start scene, you can see that I don't care about asset manager anymore. And I definitely don't care about asset manager in here. So these two things are going to change. So actually, when I'm reducing like this, it makes me happy, right? Because I'm removing extra stuff, right, that I don't need. And same thing goes with my play scene. So my play scene, if you look at the error, it's up here. Same thing. I don't need to pass around my asset manager anymore. I'm just going to make a reference to it and point to it. Right? So just doing one of these. And one more. So while I'm doing this, anyone have any questions about why I'm doing this? Why am I doing this? Because I want to optimize. I don't want to have extra stuff that I don't need it. I want it to make sense. I want my code to make sense. Because my code up until this time, most of it makes sense to me, but that one part really bugged me, that game and the object, right? And sometimes you do that. Sometimes you code and you're like, oh, I'll optimize it later. Same thing now inside my game object. My game object, right, also needs this asset manager, and I don't need that. So look at all the stuff I'm removing, right? So I can get rid of all this stuff. I can say, well, you know what? Game object, I don't need this anymore. And it won't be asset manager.getResult.image string. It'll be managers.game.asset manager.getResult.image string. Only once. Now this is good, right? But now it messes up my other stuff. So I have to go through here and change the other stuff. This stuff you can't refactor so easily. You have to do it a little bit by hand, right? So I don't need any of this. And I don't need any of this. I just need my clouds. I need this part. But I don't need the asset manager being passed in anymore, right? So this asset manager that I'm asking for doesn't get passed in. And this part doesn't get passed in. Okay, if that makes sense. And same thing with my plane. It's got the same problem, right? Up here. And down here. All right, so I've saved all those changes, but now my scene has problems because my scene also called other places, other things, right, that I needed. So for example, I'm passing in my asset manager to my ocean. Well, I don't have to do that anymore, right? And which means I'm going to have an error here for a second. I don't have to pass my asset manager to my, well, I do have to do it to my button, but eventually my button is going to go too. And you can see it's being used everywhere. And so I'm just making them smaller. I'm making my objects like a lot smaller. I don't have to do this. Look, ocean. I don't need to do this here because it exists in the global space. Like if I'm going to pass it around so much, it makes sense to put it in some pointer to it, right? Otherwise, it's a waste of you know, I'm kind of creating new objects, duplicating objects, and that's not good. So in my ocean class right now requires it because it's not a game object, right? So this is what it needs to do here. But I can just do the same trick I did for my game object, which is managers dot game dot asset manager, which will take care of my ocean. So my ocean is taken care of. So my ocean is the only exception. It's not a game object because it's a little different than everything else, and we'll talk about that later today. All right, so still some problems. Here's my scenes. Couple more changes. This is all optimization. All right, and now if you notice, my button uses it. I don't have to make it there. So if I go back to my button, which is not a game object right now, but will be by the end of the day, it will be a game object. Again, I don't have to do this anymore. I can just get rid of all this. And I can just go to game or managers. This is going to change again later. Dot objects or manage the game dot asset manager, and that'll do it. Right, so that is changed. But then if I do that, that means that these two scenes are changed. All I'm doing is changing one thing at a time, right? So that way I don't mess myself up. And luckily, what it does is it gives me enough information that we're good to go. Now, the thing with TypeScript is it's a superset of JavaScript, like we talked about before. So if you pass it extra information anyway, it'll discard the information. But if you pass it in the wrong order, it'll mess up. So you just make sure that I save everything. And now that I've saved everything, let's test it to see if it still works after I've done all that. We're good, right?
Yay.
Right, there we go. Same as before, we're working. We just do a run through, right?
Yay. Yay.
Good. So this is good. So we've optimized. Now we're going to we've done these 46 changes. This is all the things we just changed, right? It's optimized. But we've reduced a lot of references to Asset Manager, right? Which is what I wanted to do. Which that was bugging me from day one. But I couldn't do everything at once with you because it'd be too much for you to eat. You know, if I'm giving you some information, it's too much at once. So I don't want to do that all the time. So okay, so that now this is all staged, and I'm going to say optimize code. So this is my first version of my code optimization. So I'm going to do other optimizations later. Okay, cool. So now I push everything to GitHub, and you should have everything I just did up on GitHub. So that's push number 1. All right, let's close all this stuff off and continue. So this is cool. I've optimized. That's amazing. Any questions around what I just did? Because I think it's really important for you to understand why I did this, right? I've been holding off. Remember my view of optimizing as you go? It's bad because you want to do your minimum viable product, right? And you want to get going. I would rather have you do something that's not the greatest code, as an example, and move forward with something that works than the greatest code, amazing code, but nothing is there at all. Don't build a game engine, is what I've been told. Build a game. So make the game work first. And then optimize and iterate to make the game engine better if you need to. At the bare minimum things you need. Don't add things you don't need to your game. If that makes sense. Okay, cool. So I've got my stuff working, and we're good to go. I'm going to stop the recording here just because optimization is done. And then I'm going to go into some information about animations, because that's the next part.